Hi, Deepak here from Flying 101 and welcome back to another video. I release a weekly video on content related to flying, aviation, aircraft, etc. And these videos are meant to be quite simple to follow. So if you're interested in flying aircraft, aviation, you've ever wondered about how things work related to planes and so forth, click that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell notification so you're notified every time a new video is released. In today's video, we'll be talking about how an aircraft is maneuvered, and we're specifically going to look at the primary flight controls. Now, before we start talking about the controls themselves, let's just take a quick moment to understand the concept of center of gravity, because all the movement of the plane occurs around the center of gravity, which is an imaginary point on an object through which the weight is said to act. So gravity has a downward pull, as we know, and the center of gravity is that one point on any given object, including us, through which all the weight is said to act. So an aircraft has a center of gravity too, which is depicted as CG, that point over there. And the center of gravity of an aircraft is actually not a fixed point, it's dynamic. So it moves depending on the loading of the plane. When we're talking about loading, we're referring to the way the passengers are seated, the distribution of the cargo in the cargo holds, the way the fuel is loaded, the quantity of it, weight, the tanks that have been used for the fuel, etc., etc. And so the CG, or the center of gravity, actually moves depending on the distribution of the weight of the loading on an aircraft. Now, having looked at center of gravity, let's dive into the primary flight controls and exactly what they are. Alright, so when we talk about primary flight controls, we're looking at three controls specifically. Each of them are depicted here on this little diagram. The first one are ailerons, we then have the elevators, and finally we have the rudder. Let's explore each of them in a bit more depth. Let's start off with the ailerons, the green shaded bits on the wings over there. The function of the ailerons is to help an aircraft turn. We'll use our little airplane model over here. So an aileron would achieve the turn function, which would basically be an aircraft rolling or banking. This is called rolling or banking. And the way this would work, and imagine for the purposes of this explanation that you're looking at the aircraft from the back, so we don't get confused with the left, right. Let's say we're looking to turn the aircraft to the left. The way this would be achieved is by deflecting the right aileron downward and the left aileron upward. That's exactly how an aircraft would be banked to the left or turned to the left, because what happens is when the right aileron is being deflected downward, it's actually generating more lift on the right wing. When there is more lift and there's more upward force, the right wing will have a tendency to go up. Simultaneously, on the left side of the plane, with the left aileron being deflected upward, that's actually creating more drag, the opposite of lift. As the left wing starts to create more drag, it's now having a downward force. And so they're working together. We've got an upward force, more lift on the right wing, and we have more drag on the left wing. Therefore, the tendency for it to be pulled downwards, and therefore the aircraft would roll to the left. And that's how a turn to the left would be achieved. A turn to the right would be done in exactly the same way, but this time the ailerons would be deflected in the opposite direction. So the aileron on the left wing would be deflected downward, and on the right wing it would be deflected upward. And that's exactly how a turn to the right will be made. The next set of primary flight controls we have are the elevators, the green shaded bits on those little set of wings on the back of the plane. The little set of wings over there is called the horizontal stabilizer, and a small part of it, which is a moving part, are the elevators. The function of the elevators is to give the aircraft pitch control. So moving the nose in relation to the horizon, and this is exactly what helps an aircraft climb, descend, maintain level flight. It's with the help of the elevators. Elevators always move in the same direction and together, unlike the ailerons, which also move together but in the opposite direction to help an aircraft achieve a turn. Now, the way these elevators would be employed is, imagine the aircraft is on the runway during takeoff, and now it's time for it to be lifted off the ground. At this point, the elevators would need to be deflected upwards. So they would need to be deflected upwards, as a result of which there will be more drag created on the tail of the plane. When more drag is created on the tail of the plane, it's going to have a downward pull on the tail. Now, as the tail gets pulled downward, it's actually creating the opposite effect on the nose of the plane, which then gets lifted up, because the nose and the tail will always move in the opposite sense. So as the tail gets pulled down as a result of more drag being created on the tail of the plane, which is a result of the upward deflection of the elevators, the nose gets lifted up, and that's how an aircraft would go into a climb. For the descent, it's going to be exactly the same principle, but in the opposite sense, where the elevators would need to be deflected downward. So when the elevators are deflected downward, it's actually creating more lift on the tail of the plane. When there is more lift, it's going to have a tendency to pull the tail of the plane up, which in turn would cause the nose to go down. And this is how an aircraft would go into a descent. So this kind of pitch control is achieved with the help of the elevators. The third primary flight control we have is the rudder, represented by that green shaded bit, which is a part of the vertical stabilizer. This entire unit is called the vertical stabilizer, of which the moving part, the green shaded part over there, is the rudder. So it deflects left or right, and the rudder is what helps give plane a direction control. Now, a rudder has several functions. One of the main functions of the rudder is to help with turn coordination. Remember, to turn an aircraft, it first needs to go into a bank, left or right, depending on which direction we want to turn it in. And that's achieved with the help of the ailerons, which you may recall from what we talked about earlier. Now, if a turn was being made using the ailerons alone, it would look something like this. So the aircraft goes into a bank, so it's now turning to the left, and basically the turn is going to be something like this. Now, once we have the rudder come into play, it will actually help the nose go to the left as well. It's just not the wings banking the plane to the left, but also making the nose turn to the left. And that's how a coordinated turn would be achieved. So if a rudder deflects to the left, it's going to make the nose go to the left, and vice versa. If it deflects to the right, it makes the nose go to the right. So to help with the coordinated turn, the plane goes into a left bank. Let's say we are looking to turn the plane to the left. The plane goes into a left bank. The rudder would simultaneously be deflected a little bit to the left, and so it makes the nose go to the left, and that's how a properly coordinated turn would be achieved, and vice versa if you want to go to the right. So that's one of the functions of the rudder, turn coordination. It does have some other functions as well, but we won't delve into those in today's video. We'll save that for a future video. So there we have it, our three primary flight controls. A quick recap: we have the ailerons on the wings, which help give an aircraft roll authority to help with the turn. We have the elevators, which give an aircraft pitch authority, so to control the nose attitude in relation to the horizon, to help with the climb, descent, maintaining level flight. And finally, we have the rudder, which gives an aircraft directional control. And one of the advantages of using a rudder is to coordinate turns. It does have some other functions, as we alluded to earlier, which we'll cover in a future video. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this and it wasn't too hard to follow. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And as always, if you have any questions or you would like a certain topic in relation to aircraft, flying or aviation in general covered, please drop that in the comments, and I will do my best to cover that in a future video. So thanks very much once again, and I look forward to seeing you next week when we shall talk about hard lift devices. Have a great day.